I just started my screen record. This will be a fairly short lesson, but do pay attention. Okay, you create a new project just like you would with any new video here. And it's a movie, not a trailer. Okay, I'm not using the video, so it doesn't really matter what comes up here. Now, one difference on mine that hopefully yours is working, yours should have an option up here that takes you to your photos. Okay, mine, for whatever weird reason at school, isn't doing that. So if it was there, you would click it like that, and what you would see is your albums or your photos here. If you can see that, great. I can't. So if they were there, you could pull them from there down to here. That's one way to do it. Yeah, they would be there, and it would say photos up here. It's not the video clip, it's photos. Now, if it looks like an album, I think you can double click, and then it'll have them all separated. Unfortunately for me, I cannot do that. So this is designed, by the way, you don't have to open up photos to access it. If yours is working. For whatever weird reason, mine's not working at school. So I have to do it another way. But there is another way of doing it. Now, another way I can do it, I'm going to pretend that I pre-selected pictures in here. Actually, I didn't, because all the pictures I custom did was in photos. So I'm just going to randomly drag some of these pictures down and pretend as if I carefully selected them. Oh, just a minute. Before we go any further, we got to change some presets. Okay, go up here where it says iMovie. If you skip this here and don't pay attention, you're going to be dealing with a lot of headaches. Okay, you go up here where it says iMovie and you go to Preferences. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be changing the default on this photo stuff. By default, yours probably says Ken Burns. I'll talk about what Ken Burns is in a little bit, but I don't recommend it for your default. Okay, everybody quiet? Then I would recommend putting this as fit, and I'll explain why here in a moment. For the photo duration, the default is probably 4 seconds, which is okay.
2 seconds.
If yours is not at 4 seconds, you can change it to 4. I recommend 4.
Why?
And transition is at 1 second. I'll discuss that later. Okay, mine was already at that. So in other words, these pictures I brought down here, I'm going to delete one of them here. Okay, my pictures here, they're all at 4 seconds each. And what fit does, it forces the picture, this is the shape of your movie aspect ratio. And this picture is not the exact same shape. So if I leave it on fit, it's going to put some black on the left and the right. Now if I were to put my playhead here and press it, it's going to show that picture just kind of stuck in the middle there, 4 seconds. Then it's going to cut to another one for 4 seconds and so on. That's a pretty boring slideshow. Now I'm going to tell you what you can do with pictures. First of all, bring some in if you haven't done so already. If you're able to do it up here, click up here, double click on your album, and just start pulling them down from up here. Right now, don't worry too much about what pictures you pull down because you can edit it later and delete and change them around. Okay, right now you're just worried about the skills. Now when you drag a picture down, however you do it, by the way, pictures can be dragged in like I did from outside. They do not have to come through this method. They can be dragged in and just dragged straight to the timeline. But whichever method you use, they're going to do the defaults that are on the preferences. So if your preferences, you don't like them for some reason, go up and change them. Okay, mine's on fit. So that means it's going to fit the picture in no matter what. So that means it's got to put black bars in to fit this in. Now, first of all, when the pictures are here, just like with video clips, you can click on these and move them around. Okay, obviously you can click and press delete and select it and delete any you don't want. You can also make them longer, like drag on the right and make it 6 seconds, 5 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever you like. So you can resize your picture on just by dragging there. Now I'm going to show you the different options you can do for your pictures. Okay, first of all, for a title, before we forget, let's put a title on the front. Click on Titles. Just drag down a standard one for now. If you want to swap it out with something fancier or better later, go for it. And we're just going to put up here, this is going to be video 3. And I call it Mackinac Island Slideshow. And then put your name by, and then your name. Now, you can do all your normal type of editing on here. I'm going to give mine a little more interesting color. Okay, so this here has an opening title. We'll put in some transitions later. Now for the images, what can you do to these? We're going to click on the first one, whatever it may be. Yours may be different from mine. Mine is this one of the bridge. Okay, I'm going to click up here on the crop tool. See the crop tool right there? Now when I click on the crop tool, I got 3 options. Here's the fit option. What fit does, it fits your picture into this space. So no matter what shape your photo is, it's going to fit it in its entirety, which means it's probably going to have some black bars on either side. The next one over is called crop to fit. Now this cropper that comes up here, that shape, it has to be that shape because that's the aspect ratio of the video frame. Now you can click on this, like if I do this right here, and click there and apply it, I no longer have the black on the left or the right side. It simply cropped the photo down to that shape. Okay, now if I wanted this here to have the black on each side and fit it in, I can always click back up here and go back to fit, and it will fit the entire picture in and put the black on. So that's 2 of the most common ones that are used. Now this crop one can be cropped however you want. I could crop it way down like that and do something like this, just like you would any other kind of crop tool. Okay, now the next one I'm going to do is going to be the Grand Hotel. Now first thing on the Grand Hotel, I'm going to click is the Ken Burns effect. What is the Ken Burns effect? Well, let me just back up for a moment. Ken Burns is a famous documentary filmmaker. One of his first and most famous documentary series he did about 20 years ago was about the U.S. Civil War. If you're making a video documentary about the U.S. Civil War, how much video do you think you have from the U.S. Civil War?
0.
Absolutely none. So rather than have a bunch of fixed photos, one after another, of Civil War battlefields or whatever, he started this kind of unique pan and zooming effect to give like a video feel to what you were looking at. And that's called the Ken Burns effect. Steve Jobs admired his work and asked him if he can put it in. At first he said no, but then eventually they made a deal and he let him call this a Ken Burns effect. How does it work? Well, when I clicked on it, not one but 2 crop came up. One is the start, one is the end. So for example, if I want the start to be a little wider and then the end to be kind of a close-up, maybe a little closer than this even, that's how I would set up the 2 crops. It's going to go from that to that. Then I'm going to click OK. Now on this picture here, if I do my cursor to play it, when you get to that, it's zooming in. And now it's zoomed in fairly quickly because that's only 4 seconds wide. Now with Ken Burns effect, you usually want it longer. You could do them at 4 seconds, but this is probably going to look a little nicer at like 7 seconds. So here I am at 7.4 seconds. I go back here, I press the space bar, and that does a little slower, smoother, nicer zoom in. Okay. Now another way to do Ken Burns, I'm just going to randomly go to some of these pictures. I'm going to go to this one here with the carriage and the fort in the background. Now here's another way to do Ken Burns. I'm going to drag the photo out to about 8 seconds. So I know it's going to have a little more room for it to be out there. Now with that selected, I click up here on the crop tool. And I go to Ken Burns effect. Now for this one, I'm going to make the start, this one here, way smaller. It's going to be like that. See what I'm doing here? And then I'm going to make my end, I clicked in it, quite a bit bigger. So it's going to do like a zoom thing where it goes from a close-up out to a wider shot. Okay, now watch this here. I'm going to come up here and press the space bar. And there, see it started with a close-up of the carriage. Now it's backing up and you see the fort. Now if I think that's going a wee bit fast, I could drag it out slightly more, maybe up to about 10 seconds. And then I don't feel it so bad. Okay, now let's say you edited this with a zoom out and you're wondering to yourself, I wonder what that looked like if it was the opposite. What if it started wide and went narrow? Well, the nice thing is when you click back up here on the crop tool, you don't have to resize and move these two around. See this little arrow thing right up here? That'll swap the start and the end area. So if you want to do the opposite of what you just edited, click on that. And now your start is the wide one and your close-up is the end. Now I click up here and apply it. Now we're going to go here. And there it is. We're starting with a wide shot and we're zooming in on this carriage. That's called the Ken Burns effect. Now one other way a Ken Burns effect can be done. Okay, I'm going to redo the Grand Hotel one because it's going to work good for what I want to do here. I'm going to click back up here. I'm going to do a different type of Ken Burns. For this one here, I'm going to start on the left like that. And the other one, I'm going to keep the same size and just move over to the right. So it's going to go from left to right. That's it. So I click here. So it doesn't have to zoom in or out. It could be like this. See that shot there is? It's just going from left to right. Okay, so in short, any picture you click on, you can go up here and click the text tool. They do have a few other things you could do up here. They have this automatically improve the videos, audio and that up here. You can click around. He's probably, let's see here. There's a lot of options there. Now, even though you don't have to do this, if you click up here, they do have a color correction here. If your pictures are need a little bit of editing on them. Now I'm going to throw a quick the end on. And that's another tile slide. Now normally I do it with a little more interesting, with it maybe a color background or something. But in the interest of time, I'll just put at the end. Okay, now what are you supposed to do with all? Okay. Oh, I almost forgot. You also need transitions. You guys know how I do transition. You just click here. Now, you don't have to use a whole wide mix of them. If you want to use mostly cross dissolves or fade to black, that's okay. Now, you don't have to put a transition. I might have put on here between every photo. As long as you did at least half of them, that'd be fine. Because if you find every photo gets a little tiring, I could understand that. Oh, I got to turn off my screen recorder. So my only last comment for the screen record is that was just a brief introduction. The major things I showed you involved the photos themselves. You can drag them in or get them from up here and drag down. You can drag their width for however long you want them to appear. Now, if it's a non-Ken Burns photo, in other words, it's just coming out and that's it, 4 or 5 seconds is probably fine for most of these pictures. If you're doing a Ken Burns pan and zoom, no matter which way you're doing it, there's a lot of different ways you can do Ken Burns effects. I would drag it out to whatever length it looks good, which means for one picture it might be 6 seconds, for one it might be 8 seconds. In other words, you don't want it going too fast, and certainly you don't want to go maybe too slow. Okay, so I'm going to end my screen recording.